You know that little plastic stick. It can give you a life-changing answer in just a few minutes. But have you ever stopped to wonder how it actually works? The science behind that at-home pregnancy test is this incredible story, and it's one that starts thousands of years before we ever had plastic, or even chemistry as we know it. So let's just rewind the clock. Way, way back. Imagine you're living in ancient Egypt, maybe around 1350 BC. There are no drugstores, no labs, no one even knows what a hormone is. How in the world would you figure out if you were pregnant? Well, the answer, it actually has to do with farming. The ancient Egyptians developed something we now call the wheat and barley test. And yeah, it relied entirely on agriculture, not chemistry. But as you're about to see, it was surprisingly clever. So here's how it went down according to these ancient papyrus scrolls. A woman who thought she might be pregnant would urinate on two separate bags of seeds, one with wheat and one with barley, over a few days. If either of the seeds started to sprout, it meant she was pregnant. They even took it a step further and tried to predict the baby's sex. If the wheat sprouted, it was a girl. If the barley sprouted, a boy. Now, fast forward over 3,000 years to 1963. Can you believe it? Scientists decided, hey, let's see if those Egyptians were onto something. And what they found is pretty amazing. Get this, the ancient Egyptian test was 70% accurate at detecting pregnancy. Now, it couldn't actually predict the sex of the baby, that part was just a guess. But 70% accuracy is way, way better than a coin flip. Turns out, scientists now think that the high levels of estrogen in a pregnant person's urine can actually help seeds grow. Who knew? So look, 70% is seriously impressive for 1350 BC. But today's tests, they boast over 99% accuracy. That is a massive leap. So what happened? What was the big breakthrough that got us from a pretty good guess to near-perfect certainty? Well, that huge jump from 70% to over 99% didn't come from finding better seeds. It's because modern tests stopped looking for the side effects of pregnancy and started looking for the pregnancy hormone itself. It's time to meet HCG. HCG, which stands for human chorionic gonadotrophin, is the real star of the show. This hormone starts getting produced right after a fertilized egg attaches to the uterine wall. Its job is basically to shout, hey body, we're pregnant. Hold off on the next menstrual cycle. We need to keep this uterine lining right where it is. It's pretty much the first and most important chemical messenger of early pregnancy. You can almost picture it like a biological game of telephone, right? HCG makes that first whisper, and that kicks off this whole chain reaction of commands all throughout the body, getting it ready for the huge job of growing a new life. And it's that very first whisper that the modern pregnancy test is designed to hear. Okay, so how does this little piece of plastic actually hear that whisper from HCG? Well, the whole process is this clever little journey that the sample takes across 3 very distinct zones, and each one has a very specific job to do. So, as the sample flows up the strip, the first stop is the reaction zone. This area is packed with something called antibodies. They're tiny proteins that are engineered to find and latch onto one very specific thing. In this case, HCG. Think of them like tiny HCG-seeking missiles, and each one is carrying a little packet of dye. If there's any HCG in the sample, these missiles lock on and carried along for the ride to the next zone. Okay, next stop, the test zone. This part of the strip is lined with a different kind of antibody. These ones are stationary. They're stuck in place. But they're also designed to grab onto HCG. So if HCG is present, it gets trapped, literally sandwiched, between that first mobile antibody and the second stationary one. The HCG is like the filling, and the two antibodies are the slices of bread. And when that sandwich forms, bam, the dye gets released from the first antibody, and that's what creates the positive line. By the way, this exact same sandwich method is the technology used in rapid COVID-19 tests. But what about that other line, the control line? This is super important. It's basically the quality check. The sample keeps moving to the third and final zone, the control zone. This zone has antibodies that are designed to grab any of those leftover mobile missile antibodies that didn't find any HCG. So if a line appears here, all it means is, yep, the liquid flowed through correctly and the test is working as it should. If you don't see that control line, the test is a dud. Now, we said these tests are over 99% accurate, but that's not 100%, is it? And just like with any experiment, sometimes things can go a little sideways, which can lead to either a false positive or a false negative result. So let's make sure we're all on the same page with the terms. A false negative is when the test says you're not pregnant, but you actually are. And a false positive is the exact opposite. The test says you are pregnant, but you aren't. False negatives are actually the more common culprit. This usually just happens if you test a little too early, before your HCG levels are high enough for the test to pick them up. Or your urine might be too diluted, which, by the way, is exactly why it's recommended to test first thing in the morning. False positives are much, much rarer, but they can be caused by HCG from fertility treatments or, in some pretty serious cases, certain medical conditions. And here's something you probably didn't expect. HCG isn't only about pregnancy. Some forms of testicular cancer also produce this very same hormone. This means that, in some very rare instances, a pregnancy test could actually flag a potentially serious health issue in a man. Wild, right? So when you really think about it, we've gone from ancient firming techniques all the way to modern cancer detection. This simple device is so much more than just a stick that gives a yes or no answer. It's a powerful piece of science that you can literally hold in your hand. You know that feeling, those few minutes you have to wait for the result? That suspense? Well, in that brief time, you're actually part of something much bigger. You're witnessing the power of the scientific method in action. Think about it. You start with a question: am I pregnant? You perform a controlled experiment using the test strip. You then analyze the results, the appearance or absence of those little lines. And finally, you check your original hypothesis. It's pure science, simplified, right there in your bath. And that kind of leaves us with this one big idea. From the ancient Egyptians hoping for a sprout to us looking for a tiny blue line, we've always used science to answer our most profound questions. So what if we started looking at every test we take, every question we ask in our lives, as its own tiny personal experiment? Just imagine what else we could discover.